I can't do this, it's too hard, 12-year-old Marcus whispered as he stared at the math problem that seemed impossible to solve. His teacher, 34-year-old Chen, had heard this phrase from struggling students countless times over her 10 years of teaching. But this time, instead of giving a traditional pep talk, she did something unexpected. She showed Marcus a video of Shai Alexander missing 15 shots in a row during practice, then making 20 consecutive shots afterward. What happened next would transform not just Marcus's approach to learning, but revolutionize how an entire school district taught resilience, growth mindset, and the power of persistence. The date was October 15, 2024. Chen stood in front of her 6th grade mathematics classroom at Roosevelt Middle School in Oklahoma City, watching 28 students struggle with algebraic concepts that seemed to overwhelm most of them. At 34 years old, Sarah had been teaching for a decade, but this year's class presented unique challenges that tested every strategy she had learned. Nearly 80% of her students came from households below the poverty line, many dealing with family instability, language barriers, and academic gaps that made grade-level mathematics feel insurmountable. Traditional motivational approaches weren't working. Students gave up quickly when problems became difficult, convinced that struggling meant they weren't smart enough to succeed. "Miss Chen, this is too hard. I'm just not good at math," said Marcus Williams, a bright 12-year-old who had been held back twice and was beginning to see himself as incapable of academic success. Sarah had heard variations of this statement dozens of times in the first month of school. Students were quitting at the first sign of difficulty, lacking the persistence and growth mindset necessary for mathematical learning. That afternoon, as Sarah reviewed lesson plans and searched for new approaches to help her students develop resilience, she happened to watch a thunder practice video that her basketball fan husband had shared on social media. The video showed Shai Alexander missing shot after shot during a shooting drill, looking frustrated but continuing to practice. Then, in the final minutes of the practice session, Shai made 20 consecutive shots with perfect form and unwavering focus. "That's exactly what my students need to see," Sarah thought. "Someone who struggles, keeps trying, and ultimately succeeds through persistence rather than natural ability." But what Sarah decided to do with this insight would transform her classroom and eventually influence educational approaches throughout the district. The next morning, Sarah began her math class with something unprecedented in her teaching career: a basketball video. "Class, before we start today's lesson, I want to show you something," Sarah said as she pulled up the practice footage on her classroom projector. Her students looked confused. They were expecting math instruction, not sports highlights. "Miss Chen, why are we watching basketball?" asked Destiny Rodriguez, one of Sarah's more vocal students. "Because I want you to see something important about learning," Sarah replied. The class watched as Shai missed shot after shot in the practice video, his frustration visible but his determination unwavering. "Look at his face," Sarah pointed out during a particularly difficult sequence where Shai missed 8 consecutive three-pointers. "He's frustrated, but notice what he doesn't do. He doesn't give up. He doesn't tell himself he's not good at basketball. He keeps shooting." The students watched intently as the video progressed to show Shai's remarkable turnaround, making 20 straight shots after his initial struggles. "Now," Sarah said as the video ended, "who can tell me what this has to do with mathematics?" However, what happened during the discussion that followed would demonstrate that students were ready to make connections between athletic persistence and academic challenges. Marcus Williams, who had expressed defeat the day before, was the first to raise his hand. "Miss Chen, are you saying that when I can't solve a math problem, I should keep trying like he kept shooting?" Sarah smiled, recognizing that Marcus was beginning to understand the parallel between athletic and academic growth. "Exactly, Marcus. Shai didn't become great at basketball because he never missed shots. He became great because he learned from his misses and kept practicing until he improved." Destiny Rodriguez added her own insight. "So when we get math problems wrong, it doesn't mean we're bad at math. It means we're learning?" Sarah nodded enthusiastically. "That's right. Every mistake is information that helps you get better, just like every missed shot helped Shai adjust his technique." The conversation continued for 20 minutes as students made connections between Shai's practice approach and their own learning challenges. But the real test of whether this analogy would stick came when students encountered difficult problems later that day. During the afternoon math lesson, Sarah introduced algebraic equations that were significantly more challenging than anything the class had attempted before. In previous weeks, this would have triggered immediate complaints and surrender from multiple students. Instead, something remarkable happened. When Marcus struggled with the first equation, instead of giving up, he said, "Okay, this is like Shai missing his first shots. Let me try a different approach. When Destiny made a calculation error, she didn't erase her work in frustration. This is just practice, she said. Shai missed shots too, but he kept going. Other students began using similar language, referring to mistakes as practice misses and difficult problems as championship-level challenges. Sarah was amazed by the immediate shift in her students' mindset and persistence. The basketball analogy had provided them with a framework for understanding that struggle was a normal part of learning rather than a sign of inability. However, what happened when Sarah expanded this approach beyond mathematics would demonstrate its broader educational potential. Encouraged by her students' positive response to the Shai analogy, Sarah began incorporating similar examples across different subject areas. She showed them videos of musicians practicing difficult pieces, writers revising drafts, and scientists conducting failed experiments before making breakthroughs. Learning is like athletic training, Sarah explained during a language arts lesson. You get better by practicing difficult skills, not by only doing things that are easy. Students began applying the growth mindset principles to reading comprehension, writing assignments, and even social interactions with classmates. When 8th grader Jamal Washington struggled with reading fluency, he started referring to difficult passages as Shai-level challenges and celebrated small improvements like making shots in practice. The shift in classroom culture was dramatic. Students who had previously avoided challenging work were now seeking out difficult problems, treating them as opportunities to level up their skills rather than threats to their self-esteem. But Sarah's innovative approach caught the attention of school administrators who were looking for ways to improve student motivation and academic persistence throughout the district. Principal Michael Torres visited Sarah's classroom to observe the teaching methods that were producing such remarkable changes in student attitudes and performance. "Sarah, I've never seen students this engaged with challenging material," Principal Torres observed after watching a mathematics lesson where students eagerly tackled complex problems. "What's your secret?" Sarah explained her use of athletic analogies, particularly the Shai practice video, to teach growth mindset and persistence. "I realized that students understand struggle and improvement in sports contexts," Sarah said. "They know that athletes get better through practice and failure. I just help them see that academic learning works the same way." Principal Torres was intrigued by the approach and asked Sarah to present her methods to other teachers during the next professional development session. However, what happened when Sarah shared her approach with fellow educators would lead to district-wide implementation and eventually national recognition. During the Teacher Professional Development Workshop, Sarah presented her athletic learning mindset approach to 45 teachers from across the district. "Most students have seen athletes struggle and improve," Sarah explained to her colleagues. "They understand that basketball players miss shots, football players drop passes, and soccer players miss goals. But they've learned to see these failures as part of the improvement process." Sarah showed the same Shai practice video that had transformed her classroom, then explained how she used it to reframe academic mistakes as practice attempts rather than evidence of inability. When students understand that their brains are like muscles that get stronger through challenging exercise, they start seeking out difficult problems instead of avoiding them. The response from fellow teachers was immediate and enthusiastic. Many reported that they had been searching for ways to help students develop persistence and resilience in the face of academic challenges. "Sarah, this makes perfect sense," said veteran teacher Robert Kim. "Students understand athletic improvement intuitively. Using that knowledge to teach academic growth mindset is brilliant." Within 2 months, over 60 teachers across the district were implementing Sarah's approach, using athletic examples to teach persistence, growth mindset, and the value of productive struggle. But the most meaningful validation of Sarah's approach came from student achievement data and feedback. 6 months after implementing the athletic learning mindset approach, Roosevelt Middle School showed remarkable improvements in student performance and engagement metrics. Mathematics scores increased by an average of 23% across all grade levels. More importantly, students were attempting more challenging problems and persisting longer when faced with difficult concepts. Reading comprehension scores improved by 18%, with teachers noting that students were more willing to tackle complex texts and work through challenging vocabulary. Perhaps most significantly, disciplinary referrals decreased by 35% as students developed better emotional regulation and resilience when facing frustration or setbacks. However, the impact that meant the most to Sarah was the transformation in individual students who had previously seen themselves as incapable of academic success. Marcus Williams, who had entered the year convinced he was bad at math, was now volunteering to solve problems at the board and helping other students work through difficult concepts. "Miss Chen, remember when I said math was too hard?" Marcus said during a parent-teacher conference. "Now I know that too hard just means I need more practice, like Shai needed more practice to make his shots." Marcus's mother, who had attended the conference expecting to hear about her son's continued academic struggles, was amazed by his transformation. "I don't know what you did, but Marcus actually enjoys homework now," she told Sarah. "He keeps talking about practicing like Shai and getting excited when problems are difficult." Similar transformations were occurring throughout Sarah's classroom and across the district as students developed new relationships with challenge and failure. But what happened when Shai learned about Sarah's use of his practice video would create an opportunity for mutual inspiration that neither had anticipated. Through the Thunder's community outreach coordinator, Shai heard about Sarah's innovative teaching approach and the impact it was having on student learning throughout Oklahoma City. "Miss Chen, I understand that you've been using a video of my practice session to teach students about persistence and growth mindset," Shai said during a phone call that the Thunder organization had arranged. "I'd love to learn more about your approach and see if there are ways I can support what you're doing." Sarah was thrilled to hear from Shai directly and explained how his practice video had become a cornerstone of her classroom culture and teaching philosophy. "Shai, your example showed my students that struggle and failure are normal parts of getting better at anything. They stopped seeing mistakes as evidence that they weren't smart enough and started seeing them as information that helped them improve." Shai's response revealed how much the conversation meant to him. "Miss Chen, knowing that my practice routine is helping students learn and develop confidence is more meaningful to me than any basketball achievement. Education is the most important foundation for success in any field." The conversation led to Shai visiting Sarah's classroom and speaking with students about the parallels between athletic training and academic learning. However, the most powerful outcome of their partnership was the creation of educational resources that could help teachers across the country implement similar approaches. Working with the Thunder organization and the Oklahoma City School District, Sarah and Shai developed a curriculum called Training Your Brain: Athletic Approaches to Academic Excellence. The program included video lessons where Shai demonstrated how he practiced difficult skills, made mistakes, and used failure as feedback to improve his performance. Each athletic example was paired with academic activities that helped students apply the same principles to mathematics, reading, writing, and problem solving. Students need to understand that their brains can get stronger through practice, just like athletes' bodies get stronger through training, Shai explained in one of the curriculum videos. "Every time you struggle with a difficult problem and keep trying, you're building mental muscle." The curriculum was pilot tested in 50 schools across Oklahoma and eventually expanded to over 300 districts nationwide as educators recognized its effectiveness in developing student resilience and growth mindset. 2 years later, Sarah received the National Teacher of the Year award for her innovative approach to student motivation and learning mindset development. During her acceptance speech, Sarah made sure to acknowledge the athlete whose practice video had inspired her entire educational philosophy. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander probably doesn't realize that his approach to basketball practice revolutionized how I teach mathematics, Sarah said during the award ceremony. "He showed my students that greatness comes not from avoiding failure, but from learning how to fail productively and persist through challenges." Sarah described how a single basketball video had transformed not just her classroom, but had inspired educational approaches that were now helping thousands of students develop the resilience and growth mindset necessary for academic and life success. Sometimes the most powerful teaching tools come from unexpected sources. An athlete's practice session became the foundation for helping students understand that intelligence isn't fixed. It's something that grows stronger through effort, practice, and the willingness to learn from mistakes. As Sarah held her award, she thought about Marcus Williams and the hundreds of other students who had learned to see struggle as strength training for their minds rather than evidence of inability. The teacher who used Shai to inspire her students had discovered that academic learning and athletic training shared the same fundamental principles: persistence, practice, and the understanding that failure is not the opposite of success, but the foundation for improvement. And in classrooms across the country where students were learning to approach difficult problems with the same determination that athletes brought to challenging training sessions, they understood that the most important lessons often came from watching someone struggle, persist, and ultimately succeed through effort rather than natural ability alone. Sarah Chen had proven that sometimes the best way to teach resilience isn't through textbooks or lectures, but through showing students that the greatest achievements in any field come from the willingness to fail, learn, and try again, just like a basketball player who misses 15 shots but doesn't stop shooting until he makes 20 in a row.